Consumers have continued to struggle as a result of the economic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Stats SA data shows retail trade sales decreased by 0.8% in April when compared to the previous month. When compared to the same time last year, retail trade sales increased by 95.8%. South Africa was on level 5 of the lockdown in April of last year at the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic. The largest contributors were from retailers in textiles, clothing and footwear, as well as retailers in hardware, paint and glass. Consumers' abilities to spend have been negatively impacted by the high unemployment levels, lower salaries and strict credit extension by lenders. Well, time to have a look at market news now. Shares in Asia were mixed as investors watched for market reaction after the U.S. Fed Reserve moved its timeline for rate hikes. In Japan, we saw the Nikkei fall down 0.9%. The mainland Chinese stocks there, on the other hand, closed a little bit higher. But when we look at the European picture at this particular point, those stocks happened to pull back. Global market sentiment has been dominated by the overnight reaction to the latest Fed policy meeting. And of course, right now, U.S. stock futures fell in pre-market trading. But to discuss that FOMC meeting, we are joined by Patrice Rassou, who is the Chief Investment Officer at Ashburton Investments. Patrice, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Good afternoon to you and to your listeners.
Let's look at the JSE just to begin with. I mean, how's that faring at this particular time?
Yes, really a double blow on the JSE. Resources and cyclical shares really pulling back. That's in line with most emerging markets. And it hasn't been helped by the fact that the rand also has lost some ground, again, a function of the strong dollar. So it's really the sentiment coming from the FOMC and the comments from Fed Chair Powell, which has led to a bit of a risk of trade taking grip of global markets yesterday and today. And obviously, we have a bit of catch-up given that our markets were closed yesterday.
What do you make of the FOMC meeting and the comments out of Fed Chair Jerome Powell?
Yes, I mean, it's a good question. His statement was fairly innocuous in the sense of saying that the Fed would continue in terms of their bond purchase program at the same pace as before. But I think in terms of the tone and how the market is interpreting it is really everyone's focusing on when tapering will start, which simply means when the Federal Reserve will stop reducing their bond purchase program and starting to increase interest rates. So if you look at this, the consensus was that we would only see a rise in interest rates in the US towards the end of 2023, whereas now most market commentators are expecting a rate hike earlier in 2023. So that's really causing a little bit of concern. But I would say that given the path of inflation that we've seen, that shouldn't come as a surprise that the Fed would be slightly less accommodative and slightly more hawkish. I think that's par for the course. I think markets have been fairly aggressively bullish. And I think right now we're seeing a little bit of a pullback, and that's being reflected in commodity prices globally pulling back as well.
Let's talk about those commodity prices, because for the longest while, at least for the past few weeks or so, everyone's been talking about this new super commodity cycle. Do you buy into that?
I don't think that we can talk about super commodity cycle yet. I think that policy action is quite important. As we're saying, yes, demand is strong this year. Yes, supply has taken some time to react, but I think the reality is prices are extremely elevated, and that the risk is that a lot of the speculative activity will be dampened. And we've seen already yesterday noises from the Chinese National Development Regulator, who are going to put a cap on commodity prices within China. And China, being the far largest global consumer of commodities, will have a big say on that. So I would say really my main focus and the main focus of the Ashburton team right now is to look at the Chinese demand, and this is likely to roll over. So I don't think we can speak of super cycle yet.
When you look at the themes, affecting or moving markets right now, inflation was one of the key themes that everyone was talking about. What are other themes lingering around at this point?
I think that there are many others. I think one of the very important themes right now is the effectiveness of vaccines and the ability of economies to restart. I think the concern is that after very positive sentiment linked to vaccines and the fast pace of vaccination, we're starting to see a new surge in a number of economies in terms of virus spread. We've seen some clinical trials which have failed, which is slightly negative, whereby the optimism that vaccines would be freely available is probably a bit dampened. And we've seen some major economies. Look at the UK who've decided to go into lockdown again. So the view that it's going to be plain sailing was probably too optimistic. So the world is looking now as to whether we might be hit with another wave. I know in South Africa around us, especially those in Gauteng, are being hit quite hard, but I don't think that's unique to us. I think some of the problems which are being reflected in our own economy is really being mirrored overseas as well.
All right, Patrice, thank you so much for your time. That is Patrice Rassou, who is the Chief Investment Officer at Ashburton Investments. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have the labor force.
Music game is like a challenge. Sure, it's not much cheerleader, I look she like a small.
If you love nice things, you love the Quarter Pounder with Cheese Meal now at $49.90.
So you feel you've done all the excursions when it comes to local travel? Well, not quite.
Calling all local travelers.
It's time to do travel our way. Discover the wonder that lies in the most remote places. Do entertainment with style. Let us reintroduce you to the African artistic flair. Reawaken your palate for fine dining. All of this on Trends Travel every Saturday at 8:30 p.m.
Are you satisfied with services that you get from the government? Is your tax being spent wisely or squandered? Well, for incisive, probing journalism,